Good morning. What's come through today is thoughts on positivity, negativity, and PollyAnna thinking. So, in the spiritual circles, and particularly in the New Wave field, positivity is this thing that's become so, false, in fact. It's not true positivity in many cases. It's Pollyanna thinking and repression of those things that we judge as negative. And I'd like to be clear that on one level, there's no such thing as negativity. Like, really, everything is on the path. It's just a matter of, how direct and quick and effortless the path is that we're taking. The negative path is a longer route, and it's much more uncomfortable and just in every way less pleasant. And the positive route is much more direct and joyful and full of grace and ease. And where the path leads is, of course, to what I call the divine. You can call it whatever you want, but essentially it's that source energy state, which we can also call love. That's probably, I would think, the best terminology that we have at this point for that. So we're heading back towards an awareness of the ground state of reality, which is love, which every spiritual master concurs. When you clear away enough of the levels of illusion and delusion and closing down and distraction, the more we clear off, in other words, all of the garbage on top, we get down and down and down, and we perceive more and more that what's underneath all of that is love. And that has, if that's too esoteric for you, you can also think of it as moving towards greater peace, greater harmony, greater fulfillment, greater well-being, greater joy, and bliss in particular, because all of those are qualities that come from being in touch with the ground state of being in touch with that state of source, of love. So, we may not know why we want to move towards God per se, but I think we're pretty much all clear on why we would want to move towards greater health and joy. So, okay, so back to negativity. Negative is a problem more when, understand this, it's not so much that being negative, as we say, is the problem. It's more that the problem is that we resist negative, that we resent negative, that we repress the negative, or what we might call the aspects of ourselves that we are not as comfortable with, or don't want to admit to, or don't enjoy. So it's how we react around the negativity that really creates the problems. Eventually, negativity is just like an alarm waking us up, right? Every time we experience something negative, it's negative because it's unpleasant, because it's unwanted. That's sort of what the phrase means. And so every time we experience what is unpleasant and is unwanted, we become clearer on what we do want, what would make our lives more enjoyable and wonderful. So there's nothing inherently wrong or evil per se about negativity. Okay, so I think I've pretty much covered that. I don't want to start repeating myself. And then on the other hand, if we have three hands, this is the third hand, is the PollyAnna thinking. And PollyAnna was a character from a book who was incessantly cheerful and always looked on the bright side of things. And what that's come to mean is being in a kind of a state of denial where you're not real with what's going on and you're not owning the fact of your own negativity or what's going on inside of you that is unpleasant or whatever. We're not dealing with our shadow, essentially. We're just ignoring it. Oh, we have no shadow. We're all sweetness and light and butterflies and rainbows, right? And that's, if anything, more destructive than the negative, straight on negative, because we're in such a state of denial that we don't even realize we've got negativity going on sometimes. So let me give you an example. Remember from yesterday we talked about that ego-based purging type of artist. Imagine that we have one of these artists and their medium is pastry. So they're going to bake something. And they put in broccoli and caramel chunks and pickles and turmeric and rotten eggs. And they mix it all up and they bake it and they call it art. And a negative person, or a person being in a negative mode, because there's a difference, will eat that food and complain about it and cuss and keep eating it and keep complaining and keep cussing and just keep eating it. A PollyAnna person will eat it and be in complete denial about the real actual flavor and their response to it, and instead just insist to themselves as well as everyone else that it's delicious and wonderful. A positive person will say to the artist, "This is great that you got this out where you could see it and get clarity and more self-awareness. And now let's just set that aside because I'm not going to eat that." And you really shouldn't be sharing that with everyone. And then the question that where the positive person will go is then, what's next? Where does this lead you? What does this open up? What does this call forth the possibility of? How do you move forward from this place? And that's the real difference. In a negative mode, it's very difficult to move forward because it spirals down. Whatever we do, they say that in studies that if you hold a thought, I'm not sure I can remember the details or the numbers, but if you hold a thought for, I think it's like 3 minutes, it literally creates new neural pathways in your head, in your brain, that make that thought easier and easier to access. And the longer we think that thought or feel that feeling or believe that belief, the more we develop these sort of literal ruts in the mental processes where it becomes easier and easier to just fall into that way of thinking and being. So being in a negative state is very difficult to get out of. The more you're in it, at least, the more difficult it is to get out of. which is not to say that it can't happen, because it totally can. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. PollyAnna thinking people don't even know, in many cases, they don't even realize how much negative energy they're holding inside of themselves, locked down, where they hope no one else can see it. Although, I don't know about you, but to me it's really clear when people are pretending to be all sweetness and light and are really burying all of this, all of these other things that are contrary to that. So it's even more difficult, I think, to get out of the PollyAnna thinking, which doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how difficult it is or anything. I just want to say that I'm trying to communicate that it's another layer of unawareness and denial. You're not only having the negativity, which is an issue on its own in terms of making it more difficult to access the source energy, but you're on top of that, you have a layer of denial about it. So you have to, move through even more levels to get there. And the positive version is much more real, is much more grounded. We can choose to see things in a positive light. It doesn't mean we have to be in denial. It's like, have you ever stood? I was at the beach one day, and I'll never forget this. On my left was this cloud mass, this big dark cloud mass, and rain and thunder. And on my right was all of this sunshine and blue sky, and it was lovely. And it really became clear to me in that moment. I get it. I really get it in my body now, what it means to choose positivity. Like, I can look at that, at the clouds and all, and say, and just get caught in the negativity and it's raining and it's dark and it's or I can look over here at the other direction. Just by turning my head, turning my focus, I can decide to be aware of the light and the beauty. And that doesn't mean that I don't realize that that's going on over there. I just don't have to put my energy there. I just don't have to put my focus and my attention, which increases it, right? As we've just said, what we put our focus on increases in our brain, if nowhere else. So a positive person is not in denial about those things that are unpleasant or those feelings that they're having, but will choose to A, do something about them, and B, not get caught up in believing that that's all there is to reality. Choosing and knowing they can choose to turn their attention towards the light. Whew, that was a lot. I got through it all. You got through it all. Congratulations. We went a little over time today, but it's a really important point, and I guess I needed a reminder, and maybe you did too if you're tuning into this today. So with that, I will bid you farewell for the day, and we will chat again tomorrow. I hope you have a lovely, positive day, and we'll see you then. Blessed be.